Arthur Gordon Pym.
Tam, kde je tráva jak mech, sametový, prostý kámen se zvedá, jméno v něj někdo vytesal, neodpoví tomu, kdo stále hledá té dívce, jež u dveří čeká stále a nevěří, že se probudit nedá. Šel tenkrát do války, pozdrav jí dál, poslal dopisy bílé, dny jako korálky, čas dávno vzal, stěžkli čekání chvíle a dívka snad 1000 let čeká stále, že přijde zpět, že se vrátí své milé. Tam jdu ní dál, jako tenkrát dálky. Tam jdu ní dál, nesou píseň války. Tam jdu ní dál, ruší její spaní. Tam jdu ní dál, zapomenout brání. Zas přešel čas překladnů, valí se dál, přesná polnice troubí. Zas jiný pohřbil náruč snů, včera se smál.
Edgar Allan Poopy Head. Those eyes, those eyebrows. I see the puppy or the rabbit. I was walking in the library, and I saw this book in the arms of an old woman. A true bag of bones. I took it from her, turned 360 degrees, and I went home. Read this book with hot tea or chocolate for a blanket of warmth. A blanket that indeed shields one from the fatal tragedy of Arthur Gordon Pym.
Sharpen your boots, I'll put in your eye. The bloody stone brings a tear to my eye. Down to the pub for a 2-shilling ale. The bread on the counter.
I now steadied myself as well as possible, so as to have a good view of all that was passing within, and endeavored to nerve myself to the task of descending among the mutineers when Peters should make a signal to me as agreed upon. Presently he contrived to turn the conversation upon the bloody deeds of the mutiny, and, by degrees, led the men to talk of the 1,000 superstitions which are so universally current among seamen. I could not make out all that was said, but I could plainly see the effects of the conversation in the countenances of those present. The mate was evidently much agitated, and presently, when someone mentioned the terrific appearance of Roger's corpse, I thought he was upon the point of swooning. Peters now asked him if he did not think it would be better to have the body thrown overboard at once, as it was too horrible a sight to see it floundering about in the scuppers. At this, the villain absolutely gasped for breath, and turned his head slowly round upon his companions, as if imploring someone to go up and perform the task. No one, however, stirred, and it was quite evident that the whole party were wound up to the highest pitch of nervous excitement. Peters now made me the signal. I immediately threw open the door of the companionway, and descending without uttering a syllable, stood erect in the midst of the party. The intense effect produced by this sudden apparition is not at all to be wondered at when the various circumstances are taken into consideration. Usually, in cases of a similar nature, there is left in the mind of the spectator some glimmering of doubt as to the reality of the vision before his eyes, a degree of hope, however feeble, that he is the victim of chicanery, and that the apparition is not actually a visitant from the world of shadows. It is not too much to say that such remnants of doubt have been at the bottom of almost every such visitation, and that the appalling horror which has sometimes been brought about is to be attributed, even in the cases most in point and where most suffering has been experienced, more to a kind of anticipative horror, lest the apparition might possibly be real, than to an unwavering belief in its reality. But in the present instance, it will be seen immediately that in the minds of the mutineers there was not even the shadow of a basis upon which to rest a doubt that the apparition of Rogers was indeed a revivification of his disgusting corpse, or at least its spiritual image. The isolated situation of the break, with its entire inaccessibility on account of the gale, confined the apparently possible means of deception within such narrow and definite limits that they must have thought themselves enabled to survey them all at a glance. They had now been at sea 24 days without holding more than a speaking communication with any vessel whatever. The whole of the crew, too, at least all whom they'd had the most remote reason for suspecting to be on board, were assembled in the cabin, with the exception of Allan, the watch, and his gigantic stature was too familiar in their eyes to permit the notion that he was the apparition before them to enter their minds even for an instant. Add to these considerations the awe-inspiring nature of the tempest, and that of the conversation brought about by Peters, the deep impression which the loathsomeness of the actual corpse had made in the morning upon the imaginations of the men, the excellence of the imitation in my person, and the uncertain and wavering light in which they beheld me as the glare of the cabin lantern, swinging violently to and fro, fell dubiously and fitfully upon my figure. And there will be no reason to wonder that the deception had even more than the entire effect which we had anticipated. The mate sprang up from the mattress on which he was lying, and, without uttering a syllable, fell back stone dead upon the cabin floor, and was hurled to the leeward like a log by a heavy roll of the brig. Of the remaining 7, there were but 3 who had first any degree of presence of mind. The 4 others sat for some time rooted apparently to the floor, the most pitiable objects of horror and utter despair my eyes ever encountered. The only opposition we experienced at all was from the cook, John Hunt, and Richard Parker, but they made but a feeble and irresolute defense. The 2 others were shot instantly by Peters, and I felled Parker with a blow on the head from the pump handle which I had brought with me. In the meantime, Augustus seized one of the muskets lying on the floor and shot another mutineer, Wilson, through the breast. This passage speaks of the island known as Tristan d'Acunha. The shores of these islands abound, in the proper season, with sea lions, sea elephants, the hair and fur seal, together with a great variety of oceanic birds. Whales are also plenty in their vicinity. Owing to the ease with which these various animals were here formerly taken, the group has been much visited since its discovery. The Dutch and French frequented it at a very early period. In 1790, Captain Patton, of the ship industry of Philadelphia, made Tristan d'Acunha, where he remained 7 months, from August 1790 to April 1791, for the purpose of collecting sealskins. In this time he gathered no less than 5,600, and says that he would have had no difficulty in loading a large ship with oil in 3 weeks. Upon his arrival he found no quadrupeds, with the exception of a few wild goats. The island now abounds with all our most valuable domestic animals, which have been introduced by subsequent navigators. In 1811, a Captain Haywood in the Navrous visited Tristan. He found there 3 Americans who were residing upon the islands to prepare seal skins and oil. One of these men was named Jonathan Lambert, and he called himself the sovereign of the country. He had cleared and cultivated about 60 acres of land, and turned his attention to raising the coffee plant and sugar cane, with which he had been furnished by the American minister at Rio Janeiro. This settlement, however, was finally abandoned, and in 1817 the islands were taken possession of by the British government, who sent a detachment for that purpose from the Cape of Good Hope. They did not, however, retain them long, but upon the evacuation of the country as a British possession, 2 or 3 English families took up their residence there independently of the government. On the 25th of March, 1824, the Berwick, Captain Jeffrey, from London to Van Diemen's Land, arrived at the place, where they found an Englishman of the name of Glass, formerly a corporal in the British artillery. He claimed to be supreme governor of the islands, and had under his control 21 men and 3 women. He gave a very favorable account of the salubrity of the climate and of the productiveness of the soil. The population occupied themselves chiefly in collecting seal skins and sea elephant oil, with which they traded to the Cape of Good Hope, Glass owning a small schooner. At the period of our arrival, the governor was still a resident, but his little community had multiplied, there being 56 persons upon Tristan, besides a smaller settlement of 7 on Nightingale Island. We had no difficulty in procuring almost every kind of refreshment which we required. Sheep, hogs, bullocks, rabbits, poultry, goats, fish in great variety, and vegetables were abundant. This passage speaks of the Antarctic Aboriginals. January 19th. Today, being in latitude 83 degrees 20 minutes south, longitude 43 degrees 5 minutes west, the sea being of an extraordinarily dark color, we again saw land from the masthead, and upon a closer scrutiny found it to be one of a group of very large islands. The shore was precipitous, and the interior seemed to be well wooded, a circumstance which occasioned us great joy. In about 4 hours from our first discovering the land, we came to anchor in 10 fathoms sandy bottom, a league from the coast, as a high surf with strong ripples here and there rendered a nearer approach of doubtful expediency. The 2 largest boats were now ordered out, and a party, well armed, among whom were Peters and myself, proceeded to look for an opening in the reef which appeared to encircle the island. After searching about for some time, we discovered an inlet, which we were entering when we saw 4 large canoes put off from the shore, filled with men who seemed to be well armed. We waited for them to come up, and, as they moved with great rapidity, they were soon within hail. Captain Guy now held up a white handkerchief on the blade of an oar, when the strangers made a full stop, and commenced a loud jabbering all at once, intermingled with occasional shouts, in which we could distinguish the words Anamumu and Lama Lama. They continued this for at least half an hour, during which we had a great opportunity of observing their appearance. In the 4 canoes, which might have been 50 feet long and 5 broad, there were 110 savages in all. They were about the ordinary stature of Europeans, but of a more muscular and brawny frame. Their complexion a jet black, with thick and long woolly hair. They were clothed in skins of an unknown black animal, shaggy and silky, and made to fit the body with some degree of skill, the hair being inside, except where it turned out about the neck, wrists, and ankles. Their arms consisted principally of clubs of a dark and apparently very heavy wood. Some spears, however, were observed among them, headed with flint and a few slings. The bottom of the canoes were full of black stones about the size of a large egg.